What up? Welcome into the roundtable. I'm your host, Brad Wakai, alongside my co-host, Tyson Gentry. What is going on, man?
I'm ready, man. Let's go. We got a big one today. We've been teasing the college football episode for 3 years. So it's nice to get in here.
It feels like it. And for those of you who have just listened to us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, Tyson and I have a little surprise for you because we are now simulcasting on YouTube. So we officially got our pretty faces over on YouTube if you want to check that out as well.
Yeah, I think they're going to take one look at us and go right back to Apple and Spotify.
I know we got faces made for radio. I don't, the
simulcast. I got a face for radio and a voice for closed caption, dude.
Don't sell yourself short now. That beard is luscious. Luscious.
Hasn't been trimmed in quite a while. I've got a haircut in about 3 months. I live in Montana, dude. This is Grizzly Adams season. This is what we do.
Exactly. So you don't need to be ashamed about it at all.
If I grow this out for like 3 more months, you want me to send you some when I get it cut?
Yeah, that'd be great. Actually, I'll be like wearing a toupee of Tyson's long hair. But Tyson teased it. We're going to be talking strictly college football today, and we're excited. So, we're going to talk college football rankings, the committee stuff, and we want to give a big picture on college football as a whole because a lot of things are going down in terms of another conference move, expanded playoff. That's going to be something we got to discuss, and just what Tyson and I think about where college football stands and how to improve it in general. Then, of course, at the end, we're going to give you our Thursday night football picks. We've actually been getting hot. I'm not going to lie here. And Tyson, I think we got some value on the board. I think there's a bet in there that Tyson we don't have up here on FanDuel Sportsbook, but Tyson's going to play it no matter what. So we'll keep
I don't care the numbers. There. I don't care the odds. I know my guy, and it's hitting.
There we go.
And where did we go last week? 5 for 6 with 2 teasers?
Yeah, I missed anytime touchdown with Mo Alley Cox.
Oh, right.
The only one you missed actually was by a half yard.
Yeah,
Ty Johnson.
It's funny how Michael Carter, but that's funny how that works. I mean, it's so classic, especially this week. It's like Vegas loves to say like, "Oh, this was a bad week for us," It's like they still made plenty money. Yeah. And all they're saying is just come out next week. It was a bad week for us. You guys can win way more money next week. There's a reason Vegas looks like Vegas.
Exactly. So we'll have that at the end of the podcast. So pay attention to that. But real quick, if you guys know us, Tyson and I are big on the fight scene. We follow along. Tyson more of a UFC guy. I'm more of a boxing guy. And of course, we just had 2 massive events happening simultaneously on Saturday. The Umaru Kuzma Kobe Covington rematch that happened in my backyard in MSG on the UFC front, and then a big fight between Canelo Alvarez, maybe the best pound for pound in the world boxing, against my guy Caleb Plant, kind of an up-and-coming guy, really took a meteoric rise. So Tyson, I'm just going to touch on that real quick for you fight fans out there. And I guess let's start with boxing because, the UFC card was bigger. And it was really, Canelo Alvarez, TKOing, KOing Caleb Plant at the end there. I thought it was a close fight. Canelo looked more dominant. I thought from the beginning, Caleb Plant kind of had some hesitant moments. Seemed like the stage was a little bit
Of course. Like the first time you step in there, really, like, yes, he's got a belt in a different organization and he's got all these wins he's racked up in the past. But when you stand across the ring from a guy that, like, I mean, right now we're on Canelo Alvarez legacy talk.
Right.
Like, we're not even talking about who's in front of him. It was the whole talk leading up to this fight was, so what happens for Canelo after he beats Caleb Plant? When a boxer gets to that point in their career, that's like, we start looking at the Mount Rushmore. Not only like for Canelo, I think for his weight class, like that's silly. Like, of course he's on there. And now he's just racking off wins. He said something after the fight, in our primes, I would beat Floyd Mayweather.
It's looking like it. I mean, just the power that Canelo has, and he's a mover. I mean,
he's way bigger though. Right now he's way bigger. But he did say, like, prime for prime, I'd beat Floyd, and people were like, "Oh no, this dude's insane! Like, why would you ever?"
You got to think about it.
Yes, exactly.
Especially the way he's been looking, and it seems like we've been talking about how good of a fighter Canelo is, good of a boxer. Power guy to start, turning more technical. It feels like we're just kind of reaching the peak yet because he looks better. That fight was, I think, the best he's looked. I mean, he had everything in control.
The issue is who's left.
He's going to have to recycle some.
Because in boxing, you know, you got all these belts to unify. You know, it's supposed to be this tough thing, and it is. It's a difficult thing. He did it in a year. In a calendar year, he took all the belts.
Yeah.
From everybody. That's like unprecedented stuff. That's unheard of. So now my thing, I think, that'll happen as far as the Twitterverse goes, and, you know, all of us armchair experts out there are going to be like, you know, who else, like, who has he beat? It's not his fault that his era might be conceived as weaker, but that's kind of the beautiful thing with fighting is like right now, and we'll touch on the UFC stuff later. Like people are doing that to Kamaru Usman right now. It's like, oh well, GSP beat tougher guys. He just kicked the shit out of who was in front of him the whole time. That's all we can compare because unless you have a time machine, these dudes are never going to fight each other. And the way he's performing right now is as impressive as anybody that's ever lived, in my opinion.
Agree. I mean, so let's talk about that. I mean, Canelo dominated, but I was very impressed with Usman. If we're switching over to the UFC against Covington, I thought that's the best version of a fighter that Kamaru Usman faced in his career to this point. Now, obviously, you're the UFC guy. You may differ on that, but I thought Covington looked good. Just, you know, in one round, he got dropped twice. That was really the difference. But I thought Covington had a good, solid game plan, really attacked Usman. I thought made him uncomfortable in spots. Never could get that takedown on him, but really made Usman fight his best fight. And we saw it. He does have a different gear. I mean, yep. Usman rose to the level, and that's what a champion does. I was impressed with both fighters. It just so happens that Kamaru Usman's the best pound for pound in the world. In the world. And that's it's something I've been grappling with lately myself is like I grew up in the George St. Pierre era, right? That was like – so my favorite fighter growing up was BJ Penn. And I had to watch George St. Pierre kick his ass a couple times. And I was just like, damn, this dude is good. But now, like, as much reverence as I have for GSP in my head, I'm, like, looking back through. So George never fought a guy with 100% takedown defense because as far as UFC rules go, Kamaru didn't get taken down this weekend. As far as wrestling rules go, he did, you know. Right. But George also never fought a guy whose jab is a 12-gauge shotgun. Kamaru used to pepper people with those jabs. It was just kind of like boom, boom. He was just touching them. Like if you go back to the Tyron Woodley fight, it was a different thing. And then he starts working with Trevor Whitman, who is the best coach in all of fighting right now, boxing or MMA. And you can just look at his roster. He's going to have 3 belts on his wall by the end of the year, by the end of next year. Excuse me. I guess it's November. But the way Kamaru is performing right now is like, you know, I wasn't the biggest fan of his coming up. I didn't like the way he speaks at press conferences. I didn't really enjoy the way he fought because he used to be like, oh, that's only 30% of what I got. And I was like, yeah, whatever, show me. And then he did. And then I was like, holy shit. He was telling the truth this whole time. Like he really was just playing with his food. And now he's not. But that fight on Saturday, hats off to Colby Covington. Just incredible performance from him. I mean, a lot of people are going to make fun of him, you know, because that's the world we live in. He lost. It's like, haha, that's the number 1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. So this guy fought 10 rounds with him, took a couple rounds off him, rocked him at the end of this 4th round. Where does that put Colby? Right. I think second best in the division, no doubt. In the world, you know, you got to go to champion for champion. But, yeah, I mean, he's a fighter. Like, Colby's a dude. Oh, he's a dude. And that's the funniest part about pound for pound is like we talk about this all the time. It doesn't mean it. Like Francis Ngannou kicks the shit out of Kamaru Usman. Right. Like Tyson Fury goes in there and knocks out Canelo Alvarez. Yeah. But as far as that goes, I don't think Kamaru has many fights left in the UFC. I think he's done everything he needs to do. He's not going to move up to 185 and fight Izzy. That's been well stated. He said if the money's right. Dan is not going to give you the money. One of you guys gets derailed after that thing. So what's the point? Kamaru can't cut to 155 because he's a monster at 185 or 170. He's huge. So he's not dropping down. He's lapped the division. He beat Masvidal twice. He beat Colby twice. Like, who else is there really for him to go at? Chimaev, maybe. But is Khamzat Chimaev going to be ready for a title fight unless the UFC fast tracks him?
in the next two fights as far as he
then he
goes.
could get embarrassed, and it's like, well, now we're looking at it like, well, Usman, who's he fighting? So it's like he's in a rock and a hard place, really.
And that's how the UFC works too, is we all get super excited about these hype trains. But Dana White, especially, out of all promoters, he's a businessman. He's not looking at Chimaev to beat Usman. He's looking to build Usman, and he said it a couple times. This dude's the GOAT. He's the best ever. He's looking for this guy, hopefully, to ride off into the sunset, undefeated, never been taken down, never been knocked down, all these crazy accolades. And then he has a succession plan right there. So to make those two fight, like, if Usman beats him, that ups his legacy, I guess. And if Chimaev beats him, it ups his legacy, but it dropped, like, one of those two guys gets dropped down
Right.
in the notch of kind of, because that's where we're at these days, is everybody's the best ever all the time.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I don't know. As far as UFC 268 goes, it was a pretty awesome card. I enjoy the 5-round fights, the fights that go to the decision, the fights that go deep into the third round, like the Justin Gaethje Michael Chandler fight to open the card.
That didn't get finished. Holy,
that was up there for the most violent fight in the history of the promotion.
That was a war.
And then, I mean, if you don't think that thing was, if you don't think Michael Chandler looked impressive in a loss, all you have to do is go to Twitter and see Conor McGregor being polite. Because if he didn't look good, it would have been a whole different reply on Twitter.
Man, yeah. And then how about, Frankie Edgar, legend, he gets knocked out with a front kick that sent his face like 60 years into the future. If you haven't seen that.
He got knocked back on the evolutionary chain.
Well, yeah, you're right. He looked like a caveman. That was crazy.
Oh man, and shout out to Cheeto Vera, man. I mean, really building your name off of beating Sean O'Malley, and a lot of people, are like, well, it's a nerve injury, it's a fluke, whatever. What can you do besides go beat a legend, a number 8 guy in the division with a front kick KO? It doesn't get really more impressive than that. So to me, the UFC is in a really good spot because this is the first time in a while where I'm really confident in the young talent to carry on the legacy. For a while there, like 205 is going to get passed around, the light heavyweight division. But heavyweight, we have Ngannou and Game. That's going to be solidified for a long time. 185, we got Izzy, and then we got I'm blanking on his name. The dude from kickboxing knocked out Izzy twice. I'm going to look it up so I don't get his name wrong. He just flying kneed somebody. Gosh dang it.
If you don't know, I definitely don't know. I only know the big names, really.
I know his name, but well, whatever. 185 looks interesting for the first time in a long time. I do think that Robert Whittaker I think he has a better chance than people give him credit for.
Against Adesanya.
Yes, I do. Alex Pereira.
Oh, okay,
I am so upset at myself. That dude is a gangster. Knocked out Israel Adesanya twice in kickboxing, falls into the UFC. That's your boogeyman right there. There's a massive pay-per-view. You can sell to everybody. Now that looks interesting. 170, we got this monster in Chimaev working his way up the ranks. We have a potential GOAT in Usman. 155 is wide open. Charles Oliveira hasn't lost in a long time. He's fighting Dustin Poirier. We got Justin Gaethje.
Fight. That's later this year, right? That card?
Yes. And then we got 145. We got Volkanovski versus Holloway 3 on the horizon, possibly. Right? And then we got 135. We got Brandon Moreno finally taking the belt. We have probably the two most dominant fighters in the entire organization in Amanda Nunes and Valentina Shevchenko that have just ran through everybody. And the only person left for them is each other for the third time. So there's a lot of big cards out there. And then you got my girl, Thug Rose, baby.
Yeah, how about that?
Probably my favorite fighter in the entire roster. She's the one, man. As far as it goes. Fight. She's the one. I mean, to knock somebody out and then to come into the next fight as an underdog, what are we doing?
Well, I thought she was going to lose that fight, but she looked good.
Hey, man, that Trevor Whitman parlay was plus 300. That was easy money.
I can't wait for that Poirier card, though. That thing's stacked. I mean, your boy Sugar Sean is what, the number 5 fight on that thing too. So, I mean, that's something to keep an eye out if you're a fight fan. And then I think there's another big, actually three or four kind of between Top Rank on ESPN and then the pay-per-views boxing wise before 2021 is up and before we move over to the calendar. So a lot to look out for there for fight fans. So Tyson and I want to get that out just because, we love following it. I know there's a bunch of fighters or fight fans out there who want to hear our opinions on things. So we want to get that out there before we move into our main event. How about
and
that?
We'll start doing before these big cards. Maybe we put together a couple bets because
I'm down with that.
We both walked away with a couple bucks.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great idea. So we'll try to make you some money out there before these big cards, and we definitely got some out there. So Tyson and I main event though that we're going to move into is college football. We're going to talk about. So we're going to start here. The playoff committee just came out with their new rankings today. We're recording on Tuesday, so they're released every Tuesday night. And we'll start from the top here, and we're going to go through the 8 teams. Georgia, obviously, number 1. We'll kind of break everything down here, but I'll just give it to you now, and Tyson and I will do a broader picture of this thing. So as it stands now, Georgia's number 1, Alabama's number 2, Oregon's number 3, Ohio State is rounding out the playoff at number 4. On the outside looking in, Cincinnati is 5, Michigan 6, Michigan State 7 after their loss. They were just number 3 last week. And then Oklahoma is number 8. So let's start with the top 4. No, let's start here, Tyson. Do you have any qualms about, I guess, these top 8 and the positions or just how the committee released these teams here?
Yes. Excuses are getting low on Cincinnati. Excuses are getting real low on the fact that Cincinnati's not a top 4 team in the country. Like, you put them at number 6 a week ago because that felt like enough room. There's not going to be 2 top 4 teams that lose for the rest of the year, so we're going to be good. We'll leave them at number 5, and we'll be like, sorry, everyone else went out from the original ranking.
Right.
They're 9-0. They're killing people. They look good on offense. They look good on defense. They got a Heisman candidate quarterback, and we'll get into that too. They're very well coached. Look, and I understand the strength of schedule is a part of the equation, but this is a team that looked really good in the bowl game a year ago against the number 1 team in the country at the moment, right? This is a team that's been coming for blood all year, and it's like, yes, they can only beat who's in front of them. That's a classic footballism, right? I mean, we all know that. Yep. But when you beat them by 30, it's a little bit different story.
I don't think they've looked that impressive the past few weeks, though.
No, but there's also a target on their back now for the first time probably ever. And they're still finding a way to win these games because there are other teams. Alabama should have beat LSU by 35. Alabama is number 2 just to be number 2 because they're Alabama. In my opinion, that's what this looks like to me. This is a team that their best win was Ole Miss, I guess. But Ole Miss is also super hyped up as well because this is a down year in the SEC. I mean, it just is. LSU's bad. Florida's bad. Arkansas is okay, right? We're talking. Kentucky could be the spoiler. If that's the narrative in the SEC for a year, we have a bad SEC year, and that's just a fact. And to me, like, Ohio State hasn't been impressive. I'm not super pumped with Oregon. I'm not super pumped with Bama. I do believe, like, Georgia defensively at least, is on pace right now to be maybe the best I've seen in a decade. Like this is really, it's really impressive.
I watched them just to watch their defense. That's
exactly. And this is how good Georgia is. Is last week I took what they play Vanderbilt or Missouri or something. I took them plus 40, but I was nervous about it. At a plus 40, there shouldn't be a team in the country that beats another team in the country by 40 points, especially in conference. That shouldn't happen. So Georgia, to me, is the clear-cut number 1. But my biggest qualm with the ranking is you have a 9-0 team, and they've looked impressive against the good teams they've played, and they're beating everybody. Put them in there just for the sake of it. Like, for the sake of the integrity of the College Football Playoff Committee, a 9-0 team has to be there. I understand Oklahoma kind of being where they're at just because, to me, they don't look great. Like,
they should have 2 losses.
Yes.
In all honesty.
Yes, they're getting by on, like, you have a close game against Kansas, that's bad. You have a close game against Texas that you should have lost, that's bad. You bench your Heisman favorite quarterback. That's bad. So I kind of understand that. But as far as Cincinnati goes, I mean, there's just no way.
I think that's a gripe you can have with that, right? I mean, them being 9-0, they beat Notre Dame,
Yes.
who's the number currently in their rankings, the number 9 ranked team. They went into Notre Dame and won. They're undefeated. As Tyson said, more often than not, they've dominated their competition. Now they've taken a little bit of regression the past couple weeks, but it's college football. Like things change. But when the chips are down, Cincinnati's proved not only can they hang with the big boys, they can beat them at times too. So we're not talking about like a Fresno State or who needs like a fluke play or like an App State, on a missed kick back in the day, right? We were talking about a team who week in and week out could compete in these conferences. Like they have that level of talent. Luke Fickell's a good head coach. Now I'm looking at it here, right? So they're saying, Alabama, we're just looking at the top 4. Here's where it's confusing to me when we're talking about where the committee starts ranking these teams. So Georgia's at 9-0. They're number 1 in the country. They're the best team in the country. Now I'm looking at 2, 3, and 4 here. Now Alabama's at 8-1. They lost to Texas A&M, who I think ranked 17th on this thing now.
11.
Texas A&M.
11.
Texas A&M. They're 11. So that's their one loss to the 11th ranked team. You have Oregon, who has the worst loss to Stanford. They're number 3. And then you have Ohio State, whose loss was to the number 3 ranked team in the country. So by their analysis or how they have in the past done things with head-to-head and things like that, Ohio State should theoretically be the number 2 ranked team, right? I mean, just if you look at it that way. Now, I know they haven't been impressive and things like that, but okay, so if their one loss is to Oregon, who's the 3rd ranked team, then why wouldn't they be the 2nd best team in the country? Like those are the things I think with the committee that kind of just is confusing for a lot of people. And like when you say, well, Alabama's 2 just because they're number 2, I think that's fair. And I know like a lot of the talking heads and when you bring Vegas in this, well, Alabama would be a favorite over everybody except for Georgia. It's like, well, now you're talking about different aspects of what is outside of what this thing's supposed to be about. Like this is supposed to be about if you win and you prove yourself, like Cincinnati has done, not just this year, but last year as well.
Yes.
What's the point of them playing games? Like you're not going to let this team end. And why don't they just say, fuck you and take their football and go home? Now I respect them because they don't, and they want to get in this thing. But what's college football about? It's about winning every single week. Like that's what we discuss. And so for the committee to blatantly ignore what Cincinnati's doing and just keep them on the outside looking in for, as you said, Tyson, as long as they can until eventually, a few of these teams lose. And I'm like, well, I guess we have to put them in. Like that's bullshit. Like they should at least have an opportunity to compete here. So I think that's my gripe there.
My biggest gripe with the college football playoff committee since it's been implemented is this was to get away from the BCS. This was to get away from the BCS system. We don't want the computers. We don't understand the ranking system. Nobody understood it, right? Even the people that put it together were like, what the heck?
Yep.
But now it's all purely hypotheticals. Almost always it's a hypothetical. This team, like Bama, would be favored against everybody. So, like, is that what this is about? I mean, there is and I'm going to get into an FCS rant here for a second, but there is a tried and true method directly below you at the level of college football, and they do it right. And they do it. If you beat this team, you're better than this team. That's how that goes. If you're 8-1, you're better than somebody that's 7-2, unless the 7-2 team lost to 2 top 10 schools. That's just kind of how, and to me, that's how that should work. Because Oregon losing to Stanford is horrible. Oregon looking bad against Washington that lost to an FCS school to start the year is horrible. This is like, that's the number 3 country in name. That's the number 3 team in the country in name only. If you line those 2 teams up on a field right now and you put Oregon versus Cincinnati, I'm hammering Cincinnati, and I think they beat them. I do. I think Cincinnati could beat Ohio State as well, but I would love to be given the chance to watch it, and that's where I'm at. This is too many years in a row where this was supposed to, create some parity, and all it does is, if you win the SEC, you're in. If you win the ACC, you're probably in. You could be second in the SEC and still get in.
Yeah, that's the thing too.
And then we're going to pick Notre Dame because that's just what we do. because they played Army and Navy and Air Force, and all of a sudden, like
and
those
terrible
three,
USC.
right? And those three teams, like those four teams, are good enough to get you in.
Yeah, and so let's talk this then. Let's talk expansion because it's going there. So I know some people are like, no, this is fine. We're only going to have more arguments about it. You know, well, instead of arguing about the 5 and 6 team being in, we're going to be arguing about the 9 and 10 team in. I have 2 points on that, and I want to hear your thoughts, Tyson. But at least we'll get more teams. Like, okay, if you're the 9 and 10 ranked team in the country, I mean, expanding it out right now, we're talking about Notre Dame, who lost to Cincy, and we're talking about Oklahoma State, who has a loss in the Big 12. Like, okay, I'm not going to be shedding any tears over that versus Michigan, who lost to Michigan State, and then Michigan State, who just lost Purdue, who now rose up to like number 16 in the country. Like, for me, those are objectively, I mean, maybe you could argue Notre Dame, you know, they lost to Cincy, but Michigan and Michigan State have played a harder schedule. Like, they've beaten better teams. They played a harder schedule. So if I'm looking at that, like 9 and 10 Notre Dame, I can be like, you know, maybe they don't deserve to be in over the other 8 teams. So when you expand it out, I think you have less of like a real argument to getting these teams in. Now, what I would like to see when you have an expansion of 8 teams, you need a tried and true decision-making process that takes it out of the committee's hands, like we have in the NFL, like there is in the FCS. If you win your conference, that you're in. That's 5. Then you take the best non-power 5 conference, which would be Cincinnati conference team, which would be Cincinnati. They're in. That's 6 of them right there. Now you take the remaining 2, whether it's rankings, however you want to decide it, whether it's a committee still, whether it's just AP polls. I don't know how yet, but that's what I think. That's where you cut down on the subjectivity of everything, where it's like, well, we think Alabama's better than Cincinnati just because they're Alabama. It's like, well, maybe Alabama's having a down year this year. I mean, they haven't looked
maybe
great.
Cincinnati's good. Maybe they're good. My biggest thing with expansion is simply the number 1 team in college football for the last 5 years has been so much better than everybody else that I don't know if it matters at this point. Like, I'm all for a bigger playoff because it's more fun and more things can happen because, of course, Texas A&M can show up on a random day and beat Alabama. But Georgia is, at this point in the year, I'm confident saying Georgia kills whoever the 8 team is. And yes. then they kill the 4 or 5 team. And then they kill somebody in the national championship. And if you go back a year ago, Alabama kills the 8 team. And they kill the 4 or 5 team. And they kill Ohio State in the championship. Go back to 2019. LSU kills it. You know, it just goes on and on. And that's, to me, this whole thing was supposed to create more parity in a sport that traditionally has the least amount. So I understand why there's a need for it, but the number 1 team is just the number 1 team. And that's kind of the crux of this whole argument. That the thing that's upsetting about, if this was implemented in 2007, the playoffs would have been awesome. But like the last 4 or 5 years, the number 1 team is just so much better than everybody else that there hasn't been a need to even entertain expansion, really. And until that point happens again, which it will, because sports are cyclical, and college football especially, things turn over. And yes, right now the same teams are dominating recruiting every year. But one day we're going to have a real need for 8 teams. I'd rather have it in place than not when that day comes.
Okay. I mean, that's fair. That's fair. When you look at it, what do you love about my idea of, you know, the conference winners getting in automatically, or do you take it more as you have more, I guess, more people in the room committee wise? Like, do you do a larger committee? Do you go back to, I guess, a computer system?
I go larger than 8.
Thoughts on that?
I go larger than 8 teams. First of all, I go to 16, and I know everyone's like, "Oh, what the heck?" Well, like that's the point of the sport, right? Is like, I don't care about watching number 1 Georgia play Vanderbilt, and then they play Arkansas and Kentucky and all these people. I want to watch them play ranked team and then a better ranked team and the better ranked team as the stakes get higher, because that to me is where you have a champion. In a 4-team playoff, it doesn't feel like a championship to me. It doesn't even really feel like a playoff. It feels like it feels like tonight felt as far as college basketball goes, where we pick who we think are the best teams in the country, and we let them go at each other. I want to find out for real.
Yeah.
I want to find out for real. Maybe Wake Forest has something Georgia's never seen before. It's unlikely, but I would love to see it. And it's that kind of thing. And as far as the committee goes, I mean, I personally I think that it will never be. There's not a perfect method. There just never will be. You can get more people in there. You can go computer system. You can go 50-50 on that, whatever. But it's unproven. But I mean, if you look at the history of the playoff rankings, some money makers in there.
Yeah.
It's always some big money makers that make the top 4.
Of course.
And so to me, it's like if we go to a bigger system, or even if we go to 16 teams, and all of a sudden like a 6-win LSU is making it in because it's like, well, they played everybody else close.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I don't think there'll ever be a perfect system either. I just think when you talk about where we're at in the sport, and it goes back to, I guess, what you mentioned with the FCS, because I agree that's like the or not perfect because nothing's perfect, but
it's as close to perfect as it gets in college sports. I mean, I personally think the FCS playoff is more perfect than March Madness.
Ooh, man.
No, hear me out. I love March Madness, and I appreciate the fact that all these teams can make the tournament. But we know every single year that a 16 seed is not getting into the championship. We know a 15 seed is not getting into the championship. 14, 13. If a 12 makes it to the Final Four, it's the biggest news in the world. If an 11 makes it, it's like, holy smokes. It's like, as far as the FCS goes, it always feels like that team has a legitimate argument to be there and play the best. As there's no participation trophies in that tournament, in that playoff, whereas in March Madness, which I love, I'll be very clear, that's my favorite sporting event.
Hate mail after this,
right? That's my favorite sporting event. But a lot of these teams just get invited because those are the rules. You have to come.
Okay, that's fair, and that's a good way to look at it there. I mean, I'm just thinking that, when we talk about these, and I'm looking at these teams, right? I mean, Notre Dame sitting at 9, and I know they play an independent schedule. It's not that tough, but for them to be 8-1 and to lose to an undefeated Cincinnati, I mean, we're going to punish them more than a Michigan State team who just lost to Purdue, who was unranked before. I mean, just going down the list, or just subjective things like that, right? And if let's say Texas A&M wins out, and they have their 2 losses, which weren't great losses, but they went out and they're in the SEC, and they have the win over Alabama. Somehow, some way, they're going to get slotted up over one of these teams who only have 1 loss, or because that's just the way things go. And I think, to your point again, if the more that it's expanded, the more we're going to be able to see it, right? And that's what we want, because I want to see. So how does Notre Dame look against Oklahoma State? Like,
right.
how does the physicality Notre Dame match up against Oklahoma State, who normally spreads it out, but this year they've been running the shit out of the ball? I mean, they look like a completely different team. Are they good enough to compete with Wake Forest? That's because
Mike Gundy's 50 now. He's not just 40.
Yeah,
yeah.
They turned into a tough guy.
He's grown up. He's grown up a little bit. No, but I mean, that's where I'm at. And first of all, as far as the NCAA goes, that's more money.
Yeah, like, I don't know why they don't embrace it.
They're fumbling the bag here. Emmert, what's his name? Mark Emmert.
Yeah, or Emmert.
Something. Like, you're messing this whole thing up. You're the most profitable nonprofit in the history of the world, and you're sacrificing. You're leaving a bunch of money on the table. I am going to be very clear about this. I don't give a shit about bowl games. I never have. I don't care. LSU playing Texas Tech, who cares? The Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl, whatever. Like, that's one team with a bunch of dudes sitting out to go to the NFL versus a team that's super excited to be there. It's not the same product.
Yeah.
You put out these playoffs and it's like, oh, we have a chance to win a national championship. That's a better product for the sport. And if you go through, and it's a tried and true method, and it's true through the history of time, if you go through and you look at regular season television numbers versus playoff television numbers, the playoff numbers are always higher. Always higher. So you would rather, make $40,000 or $400,000 or whatever from Tostitos than you would from getting additional 2 million more eyes on your game that might get another generation hooked on college football. To me, that's a short-sighted view. And that's what the NCAA does, is it's all short-sighted all the time. That's what it always will be, as long as this system that is in place is in place. And I think that's a bigger discussion for college football, is where do they go from here? But I just don't get it. Like, I just don't get it. I mean, what are your values as a business? Because that's what it is. It's a business. And what are you hoping to accomplish? It should be to keep the product going forever. Because at a certain point, I mean, I know people that watch, like, they don't, it's like preseason, it's going to be Bama. Like, who cares? And it's like this year, they'd be like, oh man, Georgia's number one. They watch one Georgia game, watch them kill somebody 46-9, and then they don't want to watch anymore. They're like, oh, this team's way better. But if you can sell somebody on the fact that it's a playoff game, it's number 9 versus number 10, this is a big deal. All of a sudden, you get watch parties, you get people tuning in, you get alumni, all this stuff. You get an extra couple weeks of coverage. You get game day going to all these places. You get the students excited. That to me is how you build up programs, because we're at a point right now where it's like the 5 biggest programs in the sport were the 5 biggest programs in the sport 5 years ago. They were the 5 biggest probably 10 years ago, or somewhere around that, around that 5 number. So, like, they care about their brand a lot, and these universities care about the brand a lot. And the brand is hurt a little bit because we only get to watch 4 teams duke it out at the end of the year.
I agree with that. I mean, especially, I think the alumni thing is not to be understated too. I mean, when you have, and the other thing I think they can do too, and when you expand this, is have these schools host playoff games. Like, it's the Rose Bowl was fantastic, and the Orange Bowl was fantastic in the BCS era, because those were big games, right? Oh, we're not in the championship. We have a couple losses. We have that tradition of the Pac-12 winner and the Big Ten winner. That's a big deal. Now that seems like a consolation prize, because it's like, because the winner of the Big Ten, well, they're going to the playoffs. Like, we lost in the Big Ten championship. I guess we'll go play in the Rose Bowl. So when you expand the playoff, who cares about these neutral sites anymore? Like, it needs to be Oklahoma is number 4 in the country, facing off against Michigan State, number 5. Oklahoma's hosting a playoff game. Boom. You going down to Oklahoma. Let's say you can do a 70-30 split. 70% Oklahoma fans, 30% Michigan State fans. Boom, there's your product.
100% money.
That's massive.
100% money. Because that's all that is. I mean, and the other part, as far as this goes, I know the NCAA has never thought about this in their lives. College basketball does a great job of this. Playoffs come right around winter break, right when we're supposed to be going back as students. College basketball ends right at, students are all the way there because classes are postponed for the most part. Like, look at the student sections in the Final Four. They are massive. They're bigger than any game they would have at their school. And so now you're telling me that this is a we all went home for Christmas, and now we're coming back because we have to be here. But also, I'm coming back because I'm going to go back early.
Yeah.
Because we're hosting a playoff game.
Right.
And, this might sound silly to those of you who haven't been in those situations, Brad, and I think you can speak to this. If Penn State was in a playoff game, and you had to go back to Penn State on January 1st instead of going back on January 9th, of course you're buying that plane ticket because you're going to the game.
Yeah, 100%, not missing it.
Yes, and that's the appeal, and that's what I think they're missing, and it's sad, really, because this is the number one sport for fans in the entire United
football.
States.
You're right. That's college football. That's why people love it so much. It's because of the fans.
But they don't care about the fans. They want to host a game between, I don't know, Clemson and Ohio State. They want to put it in Dallas, or they want to put it in LA. What?
Right.
You're like, hey, buy plane tickets, get a hotel, and then come down here. But if it's at Oklahoma, or it's at Penn State or whatever, then you already have the It's going to be sold out in seconds.
And you're the NCAA, you're supposed to be supporting these universities and these college towns. That's what you're supposed to be helping out. So they should be wanting that to be local.
Are you telling me that the Dr. Pepper challenge, where they get like two people who have never touched a football before to throw it through a ring, is not supporting colleges?
I have to see another basketball chess pass instead of somebody throw the football in those competitions. I might call Dr. Pepper myself and get that whole thing shut down.
Oh, I want to get in that so bad. I wouldn't at least $100,000. I don't know what they give out, but I'd double the record.
I wonder what the prerequisites for that are, because I've seen some ugly stuff on there where I'm just like, these guys have never touched a football before in their life.
No, I mean, but that's to a bigger point. That's the support of the school that they give. Oh, hey, this is a cool thing. We're giving this kid a full ride scholarship, which is awesome. It's super cool.
Yeah.
And, I'm not knocking the fact that a full ride scholarship or whatever they give out is like, life changing, really. But, like, you can do that in addition to.
Yeah, you got enough money.
So it doesn't, like, what's the difference? And on top of it, it's more money for the NCAA. Because if you look at the FCS playoff, it's hosted by the home team. It's hosted by the higher ranked team. And then when you get into the back end of it, it's who has more seats, who can make us more money. And they're still run by the NCAA. So they got no problem doing it at a lower level, but at the higher level, they got too much integrity. So which one is it?
That's what they want you to think.
Yes.
So let's talk big picture, Tyson. And I guess let's talk, if we want to start here with some of the teams shifting around. For those of you not familiar, Texas and Oklahoma have decided to move on to the SEC. I believe that's taking place in 2024. And so by default, you have some teams shuffling over to the Big 12, Houston being one of them. I'm trying to think of the whole amount. BYU, I believe, is joining the Big 12, which is actually a pretty big get for both parties there. And I want to say there's a few more that have shuffled that I'm blanking on right now. But let's start there, Tyson, just in terms of another iteration of realignment. And I want to hear your thoughts on that, whether it's a money thing, whether it's these schools really kind of conglomerating together and like, hey, we want to build a super conference if we're going to get to that point. Just your thoughts on that in general.
Of course it's a money thing. It's always been a money thing. It'll always be a money thing. It's, Texas has their own network, right? They're not hurting for money in the Big 12. They have the Texas Longhorn Network. But they're looking around. They're like, okay, so West Virginia doesn't pull anything in for us. I like all these teams. They look at the Big 12. TCU's not doing anything.
Baylor,
right? All these kickbacks that you get because when Alabama or Georgia or whoever from the SEC makes a national championship game, the rest of the conference receives some sort of benefit, some sort of percentage of the money. So of course it's a money thing. But as far as the bigger question goes. And this is, I'm putting my tinfoil hat on here. This is something I've wanted forever since before it was even talked about really on a national scale. I want the Power 5 conferences, or at least the superpowers of the Power 5 conferences, to join up, and I want them to split. I want to say, fuck you. We're doing our own thing. Either adapt or die. Because to me, that's the biggest way to stick it to the NCAA is say, we are bigger than you, because they are. They're bigger than the NCAA. People don't watch the games, to watch that Dr. Pepper halftime thing. They don't watch the games to see all the commercials about how cool the school is. I'm sitting here in Missoula, Montana, watching a game broadcasted in Auburn, Alabama. I'm not going to the school. I don't care about the commercials. I want to watch the football games. And the ADs know that. And so to me, it's like, this is hopefully the start of something bigger than just those two schools moving. And I guess you named a couple, but the Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC, I think could be the kickoff point of that movement. That's like, we can just all, we can do this ourselves. You don't look, truthfully, what does the NCAA provide these people besides a platform? As far as
scholarship, free education, which especially with the rising education costs, I do see the benefit of an organization and they're, backing up or having some backbone to fall onto.
Do you think these schools won't be able to offer scholarships without the NCAA?
No, they would be. I just think it'd be more difficult if there wasn't some sort of governing body. Now, if they want to secede and hire a president for football operations, that's one thing. But I think when you get into academics in terms of everything else, I think that might be a little bit more difficult. Now, again, I'm not, a facilitator, I'm not a faculty member or anything like that who's an educator, so I don't know the ins and outs of that. I do think there is value that the NCAA provides academically. Now, if we want to talk strictly football, like you're suggesting, they don't really provide much in terms of what they do football wise, and I think
they don't provide enough.
Control it, but they don't really do anything, right? They have their own commissioners of each conference who really sets the schedule. Schools, the ADs, they get together and all that. So when you say kind of forming like a super conference thing, making it more NFL-ish, if you go from the football route, I think that could be a possibility. I don't think it'll happen, but that's definitely something that could potentially be on the table. I want to say maybe 20, 30 years from now.
Well, I don't even necessarily I'm not rooting for, I would love to see that, but I'm rooting for them to put pressure on the NCAA and pressure on the governing bodies to say, look, 2 years ago when LSU won the national championship, the school was on the verge of bankruptcy, but football brought enough money, right? So all these schools, the academics and all that stuff is cool, and I mean it's a very big thing. But these kids, they'll find a way around that. There's loopholes all throughout college football. Nick Saban has 15 players' moms working at a reception office at his university. They're getting kickbacks all over the place. They'll find scholarships. I'm not worried about any of that, because one thing that we've learned over the last decade is college football is the shadiest sport in all of America, at least in the United States. I think it's the shadiest sport, and they will find a way around it. They will find a way to get through all those things. All of a sudden, those kids are scoring 36s on their SATs, and we have no
right.
we have no governing body, because either they're going to tell the NCAA to fuck off, or the NCAA is going to adapt. And I think I'm leaning towards the NCAA figuring out a way to adapt. But this is a big move, right? I don't think Oklahoma and Texas are going to walk in and immediately compete for titles. But when you consolidate all that money into one conference, right? I mean, probably 4 or 5 of the top money getters out of maybe the top 10 in college football. Then you got Ohio State looking, and you got USC looking, you got Notre Dame. Why are we still independent? It could be a big deal.
It could be a big deal. And I want to say real quick, Big 12, the additions, I can't believe, I forgot Cincinnati. They're actually joining Big 12. Big move for them. Houston, like I mentioned, BYU, who is currently independent, plays kind of a Mountain West conference. They're coming down. And then UCF, they're making a big boy jump to the Big 12. That's a good get on their part. So Big 12, I think good mutual additions on both conference and school part there. So that's good. Texas, Oklahoma, obviously big losses, but you got to add at some point. I think they had 4 good additions here. And going to your point of the NCAA adapting, this name, image, and likeness thing that's come to bear. I mean, we haven't really scratched the surface at all of what I think could potentially happen with NIL positively. Now, negatively, I think that you can kind of go boogeyman stories and scare tactics on that. I do think there could be some stories where you're heard that will be negative, but I think overall NIL will be a positive for college football, and that's the NCAA adapting there. I mean, we heard a lot of these new guys
adapting after a decade, though.
Well, longer than a decade. You know what I mean? It took them a while, so at least they came around on it. Now, I'm not a proponent of paying the players. I think this is a good starting point. At least maybe if you want to tweak it, get to a finishing point. I don't think it should be salary like it's in the NFL, like some people do. But if you want to profit off your name and your image because you're a football player for Oklahoma, I don't think that's an issue. Like a quarterback at Ohio State, he's going to be more known than the biology kid. Like that's just how it goes. This is how the real world works. So he should be able to make money. So I think that's at least a step in the right direction for the NCAA. Now, I want to bring up name, image, and likeness on this point here.
Well, hang on. I
Go
gotta
ahead. Yeah,
jump in. Does that not open the door for these super conferences to form?
Well, that's what I was gonna move into. It's like where this kind of brings this, right? Like, I think when you think of that, you can think of the rich getting richer, right? Where they could potentially bring these all together, but it could have the possibility of rising the bottom to the top where we have a more competitive sport, because that five-star kid who's going to sit on the bench at Alabama or at Georgia, because he wants to go play at Georgia. Well, now he can get $1 million sponsorship deal at a car dealership, let's say, to go play at Houston in the Big 12. Now all of a sudden they got a five-star kid. Now the four-star kid, well, he can get $750,000. Now they got a four-star freshman quarterback and a five-star running back. Now that they got more talent there, just based off these sponsorships that they can get on name, image, and likeness. I think that could be a possibility. Or the kid who's sitting on the bench is the five-star. He's like, why am I leaving? I'm going to play sometime and I'm getting 750. That works for me. So I think there's two ways this thing can go.
Imagine recruiting pitches. You're Kirby Smart and you walk into a five-star living room. He's the number 5 defensive lineman in the country. He's going to sit for 2 years, maybe a year or two behind the defensive line that you have currently. But you can say, look, the last number 3 defensive lineman that we had in the country, the last number 5 defensive lineman we had in the country, he sat for a year and a half, and he's making $1 million a year in national and NIL deals. You could say you could go to Houston, you can make $500,000, or you can come here. We're gonna get you paid. Promise that we're gonna get you paid, and then you're gonna play, and you're gonna go pro. You only need 1 year on tape, and you're gonna make $1 million. And to me, that's the biggest difference. Is like, I think Spencer Rattler is like the cautionary tale as far as this thing goes, because the dude got a bunch of money. He got a couple cars, right?
Yeah.
From Oklahoma, and now he's riding the bench, and now he's going to transfer.
Yep.
And now Chrysler's on the hook for whatever they signed him to for the remainder of his college football career, and now school's going to be like, damn, I don't know if I really want to like shell out that money, but when it's consistently proven that you can do this and you send these dudes to the pros, and there's like 5 schools in the country that consistently send, 10 guys to the NFL every year, you're going to make a lot more recruits and a lot more recruits' families convinced that you can do it at Georgia than you can do it at Houston.
Yeah, I think that's the worry when you think about where the sport can go, right? Because we want parity. It's clear that people love parity. I mean, we've seen it. The NFL craves parity. The more that it's a clean surface or a flat surface,
until it happens,
that's what people love.
We love parody until parody happens, and then we're like, I don't know who's good. This is a weird year.
Like, who do I root for? Who do I hate? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a weird year. There's no great teams. Like, that's what you wanted. You've been screaming about it. But I do think, that goes back to the expansion thing, though. Like, if imagine how great that would be. We have an 8-team or 16-team playoff. There's no elite teams. Like, the number 2 team could lose. Like, that would be an awesome college football year. I think. I mean, that's what we would want as we expand that. We don't want it to be like, well, Alabama's number 2, Georgia's number 1. They just steamrolled everybody, and of course they met up again for the 4th year in a row.
But at least they played everybody else, and that's where I'm at with it.
Yeah, that'd be a consolation, I guess. But it would be great if eventually it all evened out. Alabama will have their years, right? They're going to be great. They're Alabama. They'll win. Georgia's going to be great under Kirby Smart. They'll have their years. But that Cincinnati's, they keep recruiting well. They can get kids. They can compete with them because, Desmond Ridder, he kind of set the precedent that, hey, if you're a 5-star kid, you come here, you're an elite quarterback here. You're going to be a big-time player on campus in the country. You're going to be making NIL deals, and you'll be ready to go pro. That's where I think we can get competing wise. Now, of course, that's a pipe dream, right? Like, how realistic is that? It's we'll have to see where we go from here as we expand.
I mean, as far as like, this is kind of off topic. I'm getting out of the weeds here, but as far as that NIL deal goes, like North Dakota State right now is stealing recruits from Minnesota, is stealing players from like Wisconsin and stuff like that. And objectively, that's not good for the NCAA. But they've had a guy go number 2 in the draft. They've had a guy go number 3 in the draft. So it's like you can come here and you can play high level football, and then you know you have a real shot of going top 5, top 10 in the NFL draft. For the other schools, don't have a chance to say that, but the other schools' pockets are deeper, and I think that could be the swaying point. And to me, that's what this whole NIL deal is about. It wasn't about getting more number 1 recruits to Kentucky basketball. It was about getting more talent to FBS schools in locations that need it, like a Houston, like a Memphis, UT San Antonio, where they're going to lose recruits to Sam Houston State.
Right.
You can come here and win 2 national championships. You can go to the league, but they're like, hey, here's $40,000. Like, they can't give you that legally. They might, but they shouldn't.
Right.
Like, this is all clear. It's all like you don't have to worry about any of that. You come here, you play, and if you're good enough, you go to the league. And that's what I'm curious about the future of these NIL deals, is if it stunts the growth of some of these FCS schools, because theoretically it should, because these budgets are bigger. Going back to North Dakota State example, of course, a Big 12 school has deeper pockets than a school from the FCS. And I think that's objectively, I'm an FCS guy, but I think that's better for college football if the Big 12 is deeper. If all of a sudden Minnesota has 2 Rashad Batemans because they can afford it.
Mm.
And so, and then all of a sudden when they're playing Ohio State, we have more than one storyline. It's not like this guy versus Denzel Ward. It's the biggest deal in the. It's like, oh man, they got 2, 4-star receivers because they could afford them. And that, I think, can level out college football because, like I mentioned earlier, there's just no parity in this sport at all. The last 5 years, there's just been one team that's definitively better than everybody else. But that's why I want that 16-team playoff too, is because more chances to play good teams, more chances to lose, more chances to look impressive. All we care about is legacy, right?
Yeah.
We only care about the best team ever and the best offense ever. What better way to prove it than to beat everybody put in front of you when those people put in front of you are universally agreed upon the top, 10 teams in the country at least are going to make it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we're for expansion here. 16 would be great. I think if you do that, you got to cut down these out of conference games. I mean, the weak ones, like when Penn State went to Penn State. We're playing.
I'm with you.
Cut
of course,
yes.
You
don't need that.
Who cares?
Yeah, so cut that. And I know because you can't be playing an NFL schedule in college football. You need to cut the crap you don't need. You need to make sure what you play is necessary to be able to evaluate correctly to move these teams on into the playoff or not. That'd be my thought on that. And I think you start with those cupcake games that I think should be eliminated.
Well, 14 weeks is too long anyways. Like, who cares? Like, Bama playing, Georgia Southern. Like, I'd rather watch like a rerun of The Office.
Right.
I don't care about that at all. Like, so you paid them a bunch of money. You funnel that money into recruiting, and then all of a sudden you don't play those games. And then you get that money on the back end in the playoffs. Because, by the way, they start a week earlier than the NFL. You keep that, and then you stop the regular season right around conference championship time. You move the conference championship earlier. You play the playoffs. And then all of a sudden that takes us right to the NFL playoffs. Like, if I'm CBS, if I'm NBC, if I'm Fox, I'm all over this because I'm making more money. I'm paying more money. Maybe we just solved it. Maybe we're the ones they need to hire.
Hey, our phone lines are open. You can hit us up on our social media that we'll plug at the end of this too, NCAA. Come on now. We're the guys here. Now, Tyson, do we want to talk Heisman, or do we want to move to our bets real quick?
Do you want to talk Heisman? Or do you want to move bets?
Let's talk Heisman real quick. We don't have to go crazy. We still got time. Players will lose. So let's give you the odds of what in the favorites where we're at now. We'll give some of our opinions real quick for you all out there because we are getting close to that time. So Quarterback from Alabama, Bryce Young, is currently the favorite on FanDuel. His odds, if you're not big on this, don't worry. We're just kind of using this as a gauge here where these players are at. But Bryce Young, the favorite at plus 170. Ohio State quarterback CJ Stroud, kind of the second favorite, plus 300. Kenneth Walker, the third, the running back from Michigan State. He is at plus 450. Matt Corral, the quarterback from Ole Miss, is at plus 500. And then Caleb Williams, the quarterback, didn't start out this way for Oklahoma, but now the starting quarterback for Oklahoma, he's at plus 700. Then from there is the fall off. So the reason why I wanted to bring up these odds is what the market's telling you and what Vegas is telling you is that these are the 5 guys that you should really focus on who's going to win this award. Now, I guess quickly we'll dive into this, Tyson, because this is all bound to change. But Bryce Young being the favorite, I know you have an issue with that right now.
Oh my God. He can, if that dude's the best player in college football this year, I've never watched a game. I don't know what I'm watching. I've got no idea. This to me, last year when Devontae Smith won the Heisman as a receiver, and everyone was like, well, it's just, it's not a clear-cut year. We had Burrow a year ago. We had all these guys, Lamar, Baker, all these guys outplayed everybody else. We're in a year right now where nobody's outplaying anybody else. And I know no lineman ever wins the Heisman, and that's just a thing. But if Jordan Davis from Georgia doesn't win the Heisman Trophy this year, I'm going to riot. If that dude is not the most impactful, and B, the best player in college football at the moment, on the best team, playing the best teams, then what are we talking about? Matt Corral didn't beat Bama. He didn't beat Bama. They put him in front of him. He didn't beat Bama. He played great against Liberty. Snooze. I don't care. It's just Bryce Young looks fine. He looks good against some teams. He looks bad some weeks because he's a kid.
Yeah.
It's just Kenneth Walker, to me, probably has the most impressive moment of the season in his dominant game against Michigan.
Moment.
Right. But you and I both know, as far as running backs go, if you don't have 150 yards every game, you don't score 3 touchdowns, you can't win it. That's just not the way the Heisman traditionally has worked. This year sucks.
Oh, God.
For Heisman contenders. This is maybe the worst I've ever seen.
It's terrible. You really, CJ Stroud, he's not been impressive when he is. He's thrown to Olave and Garrett Wilson, 2 first-round picks.
He's got 2 first-rounders out there. And so, we got a guy, Ndamukong Suh got invited to New York to sit there. But we got a guy playing better than him that's not even going to get invited? In a year where it's down? I know he's not going to win that award. I know he won't even be invited to New York. That's just my issue with the Heisman Trophy is, in the NFL, I can talk myself into certain guys winning MVP. Maybe they're not the most valuable, but they had impressive seasons. Nobody's blown me away this whole year. So, look, man, bet at your own risk.
Yeah. Yeah, taking it from the gambling point, I think it's safe to say you should probably at least throw out some change on Bryce Young because it feels like Alabama might not lose for the rest of the year. And if they do lose to Georgia, well, that was the best team. And it's not like anybody from Georgia is going to win. So it's a safe bet for Bryce Young at plus money there. Kenneth Walker, maybe throw it on him at plus 450 if he continues to do well. Kind of further down the board, though, Desmond Ridder, he is plus 10,000. Desmond Ridder, quarterback for Cincinnati. Might be worth the sprinkle there if Cincinnati continues to win out. At least you're holding the big ticket.
You got the big ticket. You got the storyline. You got potentially an undefeated team. You got the quarterback of that undefeated team. You got the Cinderella of the playoff. And as we know, Brad, and as I assume our listeners know, and I'm sure they do because they're smart people, the Heisman vote is all but decided before championship weekend.
Yep.
It doesn't even matter how they were. Bryce Young could ball out the next 3 weeks, and then he could put 0 for 40 on Georgia, and he's still going to win the Heisman. Because that's just how it goes.
That's how it goes.
Follow storylines, pay attention to those, and pay attention to who is dominating the national media.
Yep.
Because the Heisman winners vote for this award. Some of those dudes are 70. They're not watching games.
No.
They're checking Google just like you.
Yep.
So that's where I'm at with it is, if you go back through, Devontae Smith won it late last year. But if you go back through Heisman winners, it was almost always like midseason. We knew who was going to win the award. We knew by week 8, week 9, week 10 who was going to win the Heisman. This year feels different a little bit, but I think over the next couple of weeks we'll learn a lot more. But this year's bad as far as Heisman winners goes. This is going to go down. It's like a Chris Wanky type of year.
Yeah,
right. It's just like, okay, like I guess.
I'm just going to get ready for you to riot, because if Ndamukong Suh didn't win the Heisman, then there's no shot in hell that Jordan Davis is winning it.
No, I understand that.
So just understand, the listeners out there, when you hear Tyson Gentry's going nuts, you hear like, what the hell is that? That's Tyson Gentry freaking out that Jordan Davis got snubbed and another good defensive lineman's not going to win this award.
If he doesn't get invited, at least in this class, we got a problem. Like, the award's named after a lineman.
Yeah, funny how things change like that. Yes. So, all right, that's a little Heisman talk. Like Tyson said, we'll know more in a couple weeks. But just wanted to touch on that because that's a big college football storyline, or used to be at least. But Tyson and I are going to wrap it up as we always do with our Thursday night football gambling picks. And this week, there's some question marks surrounding this game, because we don't know if Tua is going to be healthy or not. And for those of you who aren't aware, the Baltimore Ravens, they're traveling down to face the Miami Dolphins down in Miami. Current spread right now is Baltimore giving 7.5 on the road. Is Tua playing or not? We don't really know, Tyson.
I don't care. I don't care.
Hey, that's my boy. You were starting on it a little bit. Now you're off it. Yeah, am I by myself?
Hey, man, I never was all the way on the Tua train, but I had 1 foot in.
You're 1 foot.
Which I think was more than most people. I think he got a lot of hate, and it's funny because it was like, oh, he's throwing to Ruggs and he's throwing to Devontae Smith and he's throwing to Jerry Jeudy. But then, Mac Jones hops in the driver's seat, throws to essentially the same guys, and maybe Joe and Waddle, and then it's like, oh, man, this guy's good. It's like, no, he just did the same shit that he did a year ago.
Yeah, but he looks better so far in the NFL.
He's got a better chance, and he's better coached, and he's got a better team. I don't know if Tua's playing. First of all, Lamar Jackson always kills the Dolphins. We know this. Throughout his career, they post 50 on those boys. Every single time. Dolphins are bad. Ravens are good, right? Check those 2 boxes off the list. 7.5, I'm taking.
Okay.
I think Baltimore covers. I think Lamar Jackson, right now on FanDuel Sports, they have the over-under at 234.5 for his passing yards. I think he smashes that. They don't have this sped up, but this is the Rashad Bateman breakout game. They don't have his receptions and they don't have his yards up, but he's passing both those. His snap percentage has risen week over week. His targets have risen week over week. He, to me, by the end of this year, and I know it's been a Hollywood Brown breakout year, Mark Andrews looked good. Rashad Bateman is the best receiver, best pass catcher on the Ravens. Rashad Bateman is a monster. Lamar Jackson is learning that Rashad Bateman is a monster. Marquise Brown is going to be matched up with Xavier Howard all game. Miami hasn't stopped. They couldn't stop anybody all year long. So now they're supposed to stop Baltimore, as Baltimore's kind of finding their groove. I know they looked shaky for a little bit last week, but then they looked real damn good for the last 15 minutes. And it took a Herculean interception from the Vikings to keep that game close there at the end. Baltimore looks really good. Rashad Bateman breakout game. Lamar over 234.5. Ravens to cover. And that's all I got for you.
I love it. I love that. I'm man, oh man, on a short week, Baltimore overtime going down to Miami. Miami didn't have to travel. I don't know, especially with that 7.5 number. It feels like it's either going to be Dolphins or nothing for me personally. You like the Ravens, so now I'm questioning myself here. But I'm not. Those aren't one of my picks here. These are my picks, Tyson. Whether it's Tua or it's Jacoby Brissett, I'm going Jalen Waddle over 61.5 receiving yards. Both Brissett and Tua have liked Gesicki a lot. I think that there's going to be a concerted effort to get Jalen Waddle more involved in this passing game. I like him to go over 61.5 in this one. The other one, I like Lamar Jackson over 64.5 rushing. rushing yards. Excuse me. I think he tears them up through the air. He also tears them up on the ground. And I think he hasn't used his legs as much. I'm not sure what offensively this is going to look like for the Ravens on a short week. I think there might be a lot of plays where this thing breaks down and Lamar's just going to go be Lamar and use his legs a lot more in this one than he did against the Vikings. So I like Lamar over 64.5 rushing yards. And then I got 2 anytime touchdown scores for you here, Tyson. Mark Andrews is going to get in the end zone at plus 130. I think you give me that number, I'm going to have to bite on that. You love him. You like Lamar through the air. I like him to find his guy down in the red zone.
I love Mark Andrews too.
You love Mark Andrews.
Don't get it twisted. Tight end position is shallow, and he's knocking on the door for that third or fourth best. You know,
You're right. You got to keep an eye on Mark Andrews. Now, my long shot one here is I'm going to take Salvon Ahmed, the running back for the Dolphins, to get into the end zone for the first time this season at plus 350. Gaskin's been getting a lot of the carries. Ahmed, really maxed out at, I think, 8 rushes per carry. But I've seen him get a lot of those red zone touches. He just hasn't found his way into the end zone. But plus 350, I'm going to take a shot on that. And we're going to see if he can get in the end zone for us. So, Waddle over 61.5 receiving yards. Lamar over 64.5 rushing yards. Mark Andrews TD at plus 130. And Salvon Ahmed TD at plus 350. And those are 4 bets from me. And Tyson, you're back on the 4-bet train. I love it.
Yes, man. I mean, last week I was upset. I lost by a half yard. A week before, I lost by a half point or something like that. I mean, look, if you followed us and you listen to these, you're plus money all year long. So, 8 bets is a lot, but space them out, see if you can parlay them. Maybe you believe in us, maybe you don't. Maybe fade us. It's not a wise decision.
No, it's been good on Thursday night for the boys. It's been good.
It's only been good for us because those games have sucked.
Exactly. We're finding an edge. The games haven't been good, but the pockets has been treating us right.
Nice. And everyone made fun of us for being Carson Wentz homers, but the boy performed on Thursday last week.
He came through. He came through for the guys. All right, that's Tyson and I talking college football as we had promised. We got some fighting involved as well. Haven't done much NBA. It's still early in the season. College basketball's back. I got my Duke stuff on right now for you watching on YouTube. Big win over Kentucky. Tyson and I are sneaky college basketball fans here because one of the things we do is we watch these players, we analyze them, we scout them, we see how they can translate at the next level to the NBA. So keep an eye out for NBA draft stuff, NBA draft conversations with these prospects. And obviously, we'll get back on track with NBA talk once things kind of pick up a little bit more. We've said a lot of things about it, but how the NBA is with their storylines. And then we'll be back with an NFL podcast as well. That's king of content right there. So just want to give you guys and you listeners out there a little roadmap. Tyson, anything before we sign off?
No, man. I mean, this was fun. This was a good one. I mean, it's just always nice talk a ball.
Always nice, especially when you get a little college action there. And we got big ideas for college football, so we wanted to share that with you all. And as always, we enjoyed you all sending us questions. Like, please do that more. So you can contact me on Twitter at bwakai, Tyson on Instagram at Tyson Gentry, the Roundtable on Instagram at _ the Roundtable Pod _ Send us questions. Like, comment, subscribe. Ask us questions on there if you rate us 5 stars.
Do your thing. And, Brad and I aren't just limited to what we talk about on here. We're both, we play a ton of golf between the two of us. I play like 100 rounds a year. Brad plays as much as he can. The boys is stick. So, whatever you want to talk about, we'll talk horse racing. We'll talk golf, whatever. We'll talk hockey. Brad makes a ton of money on soccer. We'll talk tennis, whatever. If you want to send us a question, you're like, man, these guys never talk about this. It doesn't mean we don't watch.
Yeah. Well,
I haven't watched a TV show in like 4 years.
Oh God, I don't even know what that is anymore. I don't even know what's on. Like
that's why I referenced The Office earlier because that was the last thing I watched. I don't even know what's popular right now.
Exactly. We are sports guys, so anything you want to talk about, send us over a question. We'll get it on the show. As always, guys, we appreciate you listening. Subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Now watch us, see our faces on YouTube. And then maybe one of these days we'll do a live show as well. So if you want to tune into that, but that's down the road.
I'm thinking December. I'm hoping. I'm trying to get the boy out here.
There we go. So that's something on the horizon for you all. But as always, appreciate you listening. And until next time, guys, peace.